Hi, welcome back to my midlife transit series. This is the third video in the series, so if you haven't checked out the other two, including an overview and a video about the Pluto Square, I encourage you to go find those on my YouTube channel. This video will be about the Neptune Square, but before I begin, I wanted to invite you to sign up to an experimental newsletter that I'll be launching shortly. This newsletter will include experimental content in the form of video, audio, and written form, and sometimes all three, but it will be highly experimental in nature. And I'm eager to launch the first experiment, which will include a question and answer section. And it's basically an advice column, like a Dear Abby, but instead of just answering you from my wisdom, I will use my wisdom and my intuition, but I will be drawing up a horary chart and letting the symbology of that chart guide me into answering those questions. The questions will hopefully come from people like you who will submit their questions for things that are on their mind, things they want to know more about. Questions that are appropriate for a horary chart need to be actionable and sort of time-based. Let's think like it needs to be something that you'll know more about within a year. Probably shouldn't ask me something that will happen next week because I might not get to those answers in time, but you could. I will be asking for feedback about what actually happened so I can revise my technique. I will also be asking for donations for these questions, but you don't have to give a donation to ask the question. I will be answering questions based on whether you gave a donation or not gave a donation, but I will probably prioritize the ones who gave a donation. I'm trying to experiment with making a living at doing something that I love, so I appreciate your support if you can give it. Without further ado, let's go into the Neptune Square. So for this book, I really dove into Liz Green's Neptune book. Now, this book is a scholarly work. It is not a fluffy cookbook about Neptune. And I bought it when I was first learning about Neptune, but to be honest, at that time, I was really like, okay, tell me about Neptune in my chart. I looked at the cookbook stuff, which we do when we first start studying astrology. And I'm so glad that I put together this presentation and wanted to find out more information because her book is just an amazing source. And it helped me really digest what Neptune was about. But anyway, it begins with an in-depth research into the mythology of Neptune, including creation myths, for a variety of cultures predating the Poseidon myth that the planet was named after. And I've pulled out some quotes that called to me, and I think these quotes summarize some of the main themes related to Neptune's influence on the collective consciousness. But first, I want to go and talk about the physical descriptions of Neptune in our solar system, just like last time, because I think this really does inform how astrologers digested what Neptune was about. And I think you'll agree that there is a lot of information just in the physicality of Neptune. Neptune took shape when the rest of the solar system formed about 4.5 billion years ago, when gravity pulled swirling gas and dust in to become this ice giant. Like its neighbor Uranus, Neptune likely formed closer to the sun and moved to the outer solar system about 4 billion years ago. This is from NASA, this description. Remember the theory I spoke about in my first video series about the Pluto Square? There was this theory that, Neptune also pulled Pluto into its current eccentric orbit. And it's the only planet in our solar system which is not visible to the naked eye. It is dark, cold, and whipped by supersonic winds. It's huge, 4 times wider than the Earth. If Earth were a nickel, Neptune would be a baseball. It has 26 known moons and 5 main rings, and its largest moon, Trident, which is in this, or Triton, it says Trident here, but it says Triton here in the image, so I'll have to look that up. But it rotates on its axis the opposite way that Neptune does. it doesn't have a solid surface. Neptune doesn't have a solid surface. Its atmosphere extends great depths, gradually merging into water and other melted ices. This unseen entity with its huge icy shape, chaotic atmosphere, and heavy magnetic pull contributes to the symbolism of Neptune as it relates to our unconscious, both individually and collectively. The science fiction movie Solaris was mentioned in Liz Green's book, and I actually watched it. It's a great book to deepen your understanding of Neptune and how we describe Neptune as it relates to our unconscious. It's a great movie. So I think it's Criterion from the Criterion collection. I think it was made in like the 70s, but it's a really great movie to watch. So I pulled some quotes about the mythology of Neptune that will hopefully add more depth and color to your understanding of Neptune. So the mythology of Neptune begins with water, the primal substance, the source of all creation. It doesn't only describe conception, birth, but it also describes the birth of an individual identity out of the undifferentiated sea of the collective psyche. The subjective feeling of an eternal source which transcends limits of time and space and lies beyond the limits of logical thought is characteristic of Neptune. The great Sumerian sea mother is parthenogenic. She is both fertilizing sperm and the moist receiving womb. She is male, female, androgynous, and undifferentiated, an image of both cosmic and primal chaos of the dark, unformed world of the womb. So Liz Green continues to talk about the Sumerian myth describing the mother when she was she made these creations, and then they started to bother her, and so she tried to destroy them. And these creations split her heart and dismembered her, creating a separation between upper heaven and earth. The creation of the world of the formless depths of the sea is accomplished by an act of violent separation. It is an image of struggle necessary to wrench independent existence out of the primordial unconscious, kind of like childbirth. And this violent separation reminds me of the work of Uranus in some way, or the trauma that happens after that violent separation. So I'm eager to research more about Uranus, so stay tuned. The description of the primal unity inevitably results in regret and longing for the fusion which has been lost. It also results in the persistent fear of reprisal. And so after she's reviewed multiple myths, including the Hindu myth of the Maya, which I describe a little bit later in this presentation, she comes to the myth that we are more familiar with, and it is the Roman myth about Poseidon. Lastly, we consider Poseidon, the Romans called Neptune. The deity in its most earliest form was not associated with water at all. Poseidon was the fertility god, a specialized form of Zeus, who was associated with sheep, horses, bulls, lord of the earthquakes. He was imagined as a huge black bull who stamped his feet in his vast cavern beneath the earth, toppling mountains and palaces. His trident, before it assumed its later fish-spearing form, is related not only to the wand topped with a lotus flower, which Zeus himself carried, but also with Zeus's thunderbolt. The god was eventually given a sea goddess, Amphitrite, as a consort. And like so many other Greek gods, he gradually usurped the powers of his wife. No longer simply a fertility god, Poseidon became the independent sovereign of the ocean, and his trident, like the Cornish mermaid's comb, became associated with the earth of the monstrous but defanged sea mother. By espousing the sea, Poseidon's originally earthy character seems to have assumed the caprice and unpredictability of his more ancient partner. Thus, he developed in classical myth as an untamed, faithless god without moral qualities, indifferent to other gods, men, and history, rocking himself in his own flowing. It's so interesting to me that the Roman Greek gods had this this typical kind of story where they usurped their wife, because it reminds me of history of the West and how women have contributed to their husband's career, but they were always in the shadows. And later we find out how much they contributed. So that's very interesting to read that. So let's just talk about Neptune Square as a transit more specifically. I chose a few meaty quotes where she describes Neptune in this way. She describes it as cosmic and infantile at the same time, a piece of external reality which others might find relatively uncomplicated, becomes through the lens of Neptune filled with the strange fantasies, dreams, longings, and unknown powers which point back to the very beginning of life. And it is here where we experience a secret identification with the source whose greatest intensity, if it is not made conscious, will permeate the individual's attitude toward the world and others, bringing confusion, deception, and the strange passivity of the infant unless he or she can begin to explore the secret fantasy and gently peel it off outer objects, ideologies, and people to which it has attached itself to. Neptune's longing pours out like a flood in both directions. Nostalgia for the lost home and yearning for the reunion that lies someplace, sometime in a faraway future. For many Western people in the modern era, the religious idea of an Eden-like afterlife seems intellectually absurd. Sometimes, but the nostalgia and yearning have not gone away, and the hope of blissful reunion, now regulated to the unconscious, is therefore projected on some future point in this life when the right partner arrives, or the right job manifests itself, or when something somehow magically comes in and everything becomes all right. Sound familiar? Transpersonal experiences occur most frequently at moments of great crisis. She starts to talk about the midlife transits here. Such experiences are typical of midlife when the established ego identity may have become too rigid and can no longer allow room for undeveloped dimensions of the personality to emerge. It is not coincidental that during the decade between the ages of 38 to 48, the most common period during which these experiences occur, we all undergo those three great astrological cycles, which comprise what is euphemistically known as the midlife crisis. Uranus opposing its natal place, Saturn opposing its natal place, and Neptune squaring its natal place. She leaves out the Pluto Square here. From the perspective of transpersonal psychology, the pattern of difficult symptoms at this critical point of life may reflect the hidden orchestration of the larger self. Depression, loss of meaning, physical illness, and even psychotic breakdown may imply not a deep underlying pathology, but a creative force which is seeking to break down outworn life patterns and attitudes. Thus, what was previously experienced as normality may, through rigidity and over-identification, have become life-destroying. And what is diagnosed as illness may in fact be the unprepossessing surface of a secret healing process. Many problems which, in a psychoanalytic framework, could be attributed to the lingering and still suppurating wounds of childhood may be viewed from this perspective, the outward signs of a profound spiritual crisis, which must be recognized and validated for what it is, if life is to move forward creatively. The longing for redemption may arise because one cannot accept life as it is. Equally, it may arise because there's too much realism coupled with reluctance to face one's own reality, have rendered life stagnant and disconnected from the wellspring of the heart and the soul. So basically, you come in and you have your Saturn return, and you become more serious about life, and you put up different structures in your life to join the collective, your peer group, and you start working towards the success that everybody starts, to focus on when they become an adult. And then the Pluto Square comes through and it tests your personal power. It tests a lot of things that you've set up for this life. It tests that foundation. And as many people do, when they become an adult, we start to over-identify with these constructs that, everybody talks about, this meaning of success, who's successful and who's this, who's that. We start to really over-identify sometimes with these obligations that we've set up for ourselves. And sometimes, our peer group, puts together these structures that become quite debilitating. And if we, life is about change. It's constant change. So if we are so strict with ourselves about, this is who we are, and this is who we identify with, and this is what success means, and this is what I need to do to become successful, or this is how I look at myself, I should be constant, and I'm not a person that can change. There's no, kind of creative exploration in my world. That can really break down, because it's not true that we're constant. We're constantly changing. And if we're not open to adapt to the changes that are inside us, especially as we get older and life changes for us and we go through different phases, these transits will come in, and sometimes they just kind of knock you to your knees, so that you have these cathartic moments, so that you have the opportunity to embrace this new phase and embrace the creativity of life, even if it means that you have to step off of the ways that the collective views success, or the ways that the collective is very focused on the identification of who we are and what makes us successful. Sometimes we have to kind of drop out of that, and this is what the Neptune Square is all about. So I want to talk specifically about how this shows up in a chart, and I know myself the best, so I'll be able to walk you through my chart. But I want to address a few things before I talk about this chart specifically. When I posted about the Pluto Square, Ray Gross is a professional astrologer, well known. You probably you might have heard of him, and if you haven't, you should check him out. He commented to me about the Pluto Square, saying it was an important transit that didn't get enough attention. And he also pointed out that Meghan Markle experienced her Pluto Square in her 4th house during the time her father came out in the gossip magazines right before she got married to Harry. So this is another demonstration about how the mechanisms of Pluto test your personal power. And it also reminded me that Pluto had been in my 3rd house of siblings during my Pluto Square, and it's still there, of course. It had just gone over my Mars before my Neptune Square. And I had, some major confrontations with my siblings during this time. As if you watch my Pluto Square, you know that I was born from a large family, and I have a chart that indicates that I have some family karma, which is so true. And then Mars being in my 3rd house opposite Saturn does indicate there's some battles within my sibling structure, which was also true. But during this time, we had come together. My parents had gotten divorced, and we had rallied around each other through that experience. But during this time, when I had my own child, and I was no longer kind of the favorite auntie, I had my own child, establishing my own family, and Obama had come on board, and gay marriage had come out. I had some confrontations with my siblings over gay marriage. Most of my family is very conservative, if not religious, very conservative minded. And we had some disagreements about that. And I really didn't handle those disagreements very well. And if I would go back, I would deal with them differently. But at that time, I couldn't understand why they didn't support the individual's right to marry whoever they want. And I had a lot of fights with my family. And it wasn't only this, it was broader about my child and how I wanted to raise my child. So, but also I wanted to address this, because of the orbit of Pluto, some people will experience the Neptune Square before their Pluto Square. I was just talking to someone in one of my groups, and this was the case. But I'm going to talk about these transits as I experience them. For me, I experienced this surge of ambition in me, during my Pluto Square to scale the heights of my power and to reach, the heights of what I had been pursuing. And I confronted roadblocks during this time. And with each move I made, I felt externally blocked from the outer success that I had been craving, which is very symbolic of this Saturn Mars opposition. I frequently feel blocked, which you do from an opposition. It's a projection. These dynamics or projection of Saturn can be multiple people. There were, people at my job, they're elders, the people at my job, even if they weren't age-related elders, religious people from other countries. Actually, during this time, I worked for a startup company where the founders were all from 3 different countries. So it's very interesting when you dig into the dynamics, you see the truth in all of these symbols that you were imprinted with it. So I had been trying to achieve this outer success that I had been craving that would demonstrate my specialness in the world. And 4 years later, I experienced my Neptune Square, which was timed near exact to the date that I got unceremoniously fired from that startup I had joined 2 years prior. It had been a battle to get hired. They rejected me at first, and it felt like an uphill battle the whole time I was there. But I felt some elation because I had brought tremendous success to the company as in the form of PR and the things that I had implemented. I built out a great team, but I didn't feel supported by the founders. The founders were in disagreement about where the company should go, and the founder I reported to was leading only part-time and from another state. I was given no budget, no trust to run my team. And right before I got fired, I confronted my boss about some bonuses I had promised my team in their hiring contract, which had been approved by him. And the way I handled those battles was not my proudest moments, but it was about my team. And I don't regret fighting for them. I regret how I did it. At this point, I became very disillusioned, as the transit indicates. I was lost and I was searching for answers. Again, it's important to understand the natal chart before you can fully understand these cycles. Neptune is an important planet in my chart. I am what you call Neptunian, with Neptune conjunct my north node, Pluto in the 4th house, and I've got a moon, which is square my nodes, very important. Venus, which is conjunct Jupiter, all in Pisces. Jupiter rules my north node. And so it is very important in my life, and true to form, Neptune's themes in my life have been prevalent. As you may recall from my Pluto Square video, I was born into a large religious family. I was the 4th of 9 children, and we brought up each other. And our parents were mostly absent. We moved around a lot. I felt like I was lost in a sea of chaos most of my growing up years. I was a very open child. And when I was young, I remember feeling very close to God. And I had a rich imagination. But this reverted to a kind of compulsion after disturbing things happened to me when I was a young girl. And I had these distorted thought patterns that led to other distorted thought patterns. But mostly I used my imagination to escape. And there were these, like I said, this distortion in my thought patterns, which was deep in my subconscious. And it took many years for me to dislodge those. I was basically brainwashed, and I felt a lot of shame about who I was. I was emotionally and relationally stunted. I see that now, with an inability to regulate my emotions, which contributed to this. And today you would label this as complex PTSD. So as I finally created a family of my own, which I had put off for many years, very scared of doing that, these old family themes started to resurface. Neptune started transiting Pisces during my Pluto Square. During this time, I started to drink more heavily to deal with the stress of working around the clock and raising my child. By this point, I was starting to burn out, heavily burn out. I found myself with barely enough energy to even think about joining another startup. I was experiencing problems in my marriage, and I was starting to look for a way out of the life that I had created. It was not yet my breaking point. It took me a couple more years before my life really fell apart during my Uranus opposition. But as you'll notice, Jupiter, which is transiting Jupiter, which is the ruler of my north node, was opposite of my Neptune. It was on the north node, and the south node was on my natal Jupiter. And I wanted to point out that transiting Jupiter was retrograde in the 11th house in the hexagram labeled overreach. And the north node is in the hexagram labeled youthful folly. And Venus, which is conjunct Jupiter, but also square my nodes, was in the hexagram labeled struggle, opposing my natal Uranus, which is in the hexagram of provocation. So there was a lot of struggle. There was a lot of overreach that I was doing at that time, a lot of folly that I was creating in my life that created more chaos at that time, but led me to search. And also Mercury, you see Mercury is the ruler of my south node. It was in the 8th house. It was retrograde. And it is also in the hexagram, a bird in the hand, which is basically about being grateful about what you have instead of pining for what you don't have. I had still a lot more work to do until I got to that point. And I want to say that Neptune has been transiting my personal planets all the way through my midlife transits. And as soon as it got out of, the way of Jupiter, basically, the veil started to lift and I started to see things more clearly. But it was quite a time. I think Neptune, because through all of these experiences, I came out on the other side and I could really see that it helped me, even though it added a lot of distortion to what I was experiencing. And I didn't realize, the depth of what I was searching for and what I finally felt, I felt into after I went through all these experiences. It's really hard to see the forest through the trees, they say. But when you're experiencing these midlife transits, I would say that it's really until your Chiron return that you really can digest it all. And I'm still going through my Chiron return. So I'm sure I will have even more of a digestion of what has been going on in my life and where my direction is going by the end of this year. Okay, so I'll close with a few more thoughts about Neptune and the importance of Saturn to ground Neptune's more flightier Hall of Mirrors. Thank God Saturn has followed up. Saturn is also now in Pisces, so it's adding a lot more solid foundations to what I experienced. Its job is to wake you up to something higher, but it can just as easily mire you in one illusion after the other. It isn't until recently that the veil of Neptune, like I said, it's finally lifted in Saturn's transits through Pisces, while not being a cakewalk, has really helped ground Neptune's lessons. I will leave you with a few more quotes about this process of grounding Neptune and how differently we deal with Neptune in the West than in the East. I think these quotes will be helpful. So, like I said in my earlier, in the earlier part of this video, she talks about Maya as, we talk about Maya a lot, about this illusion of life. So Maya is the measuring out or the creation of forms. It is also an illusion, trick, artifice, deceit, jugglery, sorcery, or work of witchcraft. The gods themselves are the production of the Maya, the spontaneous creations of an undifferentiated divine fluid. Thus, Maya, the divine mother, produces not only the gods, but also the universe in which they operate. Even the image of mother is a trick of the Maya, for the Maya has no form of itself. It is the human imagination which perceives it as her, and yet the human imagination is her, and perhaps the purest form we can experience. The creative process, be it a book, painting, a piece of music, a play, or an inventive recipe, is therefore not me using my imagination, but the imagination expressing itself through the vehicle of my life, which itself is a product of the same primal stuff. Maya is known in Hindu teaching as Shakti, cosmic energy. Interestingly, the word Shakti or Sakti is also the word for the female sexual organs. Maya Shakti is personified as the world protecting feminine, maternal face of the ultimate being. Through the power of self-transformation, the energy of the abyss puts forth or assumes individualized forms, endowed with temporary life, a limited ego consciousness. For a time, it nourishes and sustains these with a vivified sap. Then it dissolves them again, without mercy or distinction, back into the anonymous energy out of which they arose. That is the work. That is the character of Maya, the all-consuming maternal womb. So I wanted to talk about the East versus the West, because I think this is helpful for people who are born in the West. The West is solar. The West is solar or individual. The East is more Neptunian. The successful integration of the two approaches in the West seems to depend upon whether or not the experience of the transpersonal realm can be earthed in everyday life, allowing the individual to partake of both worlds. Intelligent gurus know this and are careful to adapt Eastern spiritual practices to the needs of the Western psyche. She talks about Rajneesh, which is Osho, and I think she has some good understanding of this. And so I wanted to read a little bit more about this. The Eastern gurus arose in the 70s and 80s when Neptune was in Sagittarius, which is also when Neptune was in, Sagittarius when I was born. He attracted large numbers of unhappy and disaffected young people who found the Sumerian elements of Western culture intolerably painful, oppressive, and meaningless. It passed when Neptune went into Capricorn, but transcendental meditation has stuck. And I thought this was very interesting, the Saturnian elements, because I know one of my teachers who went into his one of his communes early in his life, and he's very Saturnian, a lot of Capricorn in his chart. So Saturn can bind you with responsibilities. And so there needs to be a balance, I think, there. I have Saturn at the top of my chart. It is an inconjunct with Neptune. They don't see each other. So I would describe that as my parent, my authoritarian parent who was embedded into my unconsciousness. And I had this fight with myself all the time. I could never understand it. I would motivate myself by being really cruel to myself, which actually, contributed to the cruelty that I sometimes had in my relationships, because I was so pent up with a lot of the cruelty that I had to myself. And I felt like it was the only way that I could get things done. And it's funny how your mind tries to help you in that way. So East meets West. When is the guru truly enlightened? And when is or she as wounded and as lost as those who crowd into the ashram seeking salvation? And are these things mutually exclusive? And does it matter anyway? Perhaps the only answer to these questions lies in how one copes with one's own Neptune. Those individuals who pass through the Rajneesh experience with positive results outnumber those who emerge feeling manipulated and injured. Ultimately, those who strove to deal with their own dependency issues were in position to extract what was worthwhile, while finding the strength to extricate themselves when too much was asked of them. Or put another way, they simply grew up and were able to view Rajneesh and his teachings from a more objective perspective without having to utterly deny whatever value they found in it. This is the archetypal process of separating from the divine parent, with all the inevitable disillusionment of discovering that this caretaker, far from being an immortal and omnipotent source of life, is simply a person with failings who got some things right and other things wrong. it is possible that one of the challenges of Neptune is the necessity of learning that in the end, we cannot blame our gurus, messiahs, and political leaders for our misery. For it is we who have chosen them and then blindly followed without sufficient individual evaluation of their teachings and policies. When our gurus fail us, we dismember them. But when we are left with our ancient hunger and a remarkable capacity to create yet another Messiah who can lead us back to the paradise garden, it's so emblematic of the ways that we have been dealing with people in the public sphere lately. It's punishment without room to grow. We dismember people when they make mistakes instead of allowing them to be human. We all make mistakes. And until we can accept that about them ourselves, I don't think we're going to be able to accept that about our peer group. So it's something to think about. And then I wanted to talk about how this shows up, Neptunian illusions in basically romantic love. Romantic love is the single greatest energy system in the Western psyche. It is our culture. It has supplanted religion as the arena in which men and women seek meaning, transcendence, wholeness, and ecstasy. For romantic love doesn't just mean loving someone. It means being in love. This is a psychological phenomenon that is very specific. When we are in love, we believe we have found the ultimate meaning of life, revealed in another human being. Life suddenly seems to have wholeness, a superhuman intensity that lifts us high above the ordinary plane of existence. Then they get locked in a cycle of victim and redeemer. So that's another interesting way to look at Neptune, the victim and the redeemer. We get addicted to that. It is here that Neptune most needs Saturn's realism and containment. Sadly, it is also here that many helpers working in the transpersonal field cannot guide the individual to an integration of the experience into everyday life or a deeper understanding of why he or she feels so guilty and bereft. Instead, they try to instruct the person in how to reclaim the oceanic experience through techniques which transcend or obliterate ego consciousness. Neptune's internal dynamic is that of permanent addiction to paradise. Neptune opens the door to ecstatic experiences of dissolution, but it also makes us addicted to them, polarizing us against earthly life rather than allowing us to understand both dimensions of reality as part of the design of that same larger self which one has just encountered. So I think that's very true. And I want to point out that I've had several people who have gone through Kundalini experiences in religious settings and came out and had no one to assist them afterwards. And they talked about how their life was completely upended and they felt psychotic and there was no practical help. And so that's Neptune. I feel tremendously lucky that I had Saturn that really came after my my Jupiter and my Neptune transits to add some sobering levity to what I experienced. It's been tough, but it's also been welcome because I see now that it was what I need to move on to that next level. And I feel that now that I'm in my Chiron return, I feel a more soberness, a more realistic expectation of what's next. I still don't know what's next, but I'm trusting life more. And I'm less looking for things outside of myself and more looking at my internal life and what's going on internally, and what I give myself internally will mirror in what I see externally. So I hope that helps. And like I said, if you want somebody, personally to help you through these transits, you should, find a trusted astrologer. I think astrology is super helpful. It really helped me understand and get through this time period. I fell in love with it at the same time. It is such a vast art There's so much to learn, and I love that part of astrology, but I also just love the ways that it can help you in to understanding yourself a lot more and understanding these cycles and bring you to a more awakened state. You don't have to be trapped in the wheel, of course. Sometimes we over-identify with the wheel itself. There's ways to get out of the wheel, but I think it's a tremendous tool, and I hope it's helpful to you. Thank you for watching, and thank you for signing up. Again, I'm going to leave the links down below this video. I hope you subscribe and sign up, and I won't be spammy. I'll only launch things that are interesting to me. I hope they're interesting to you. Thank you.